school fees arrears. The head teacher later got a report from the son's mother that he had been sodomized.
So she demanded for the property of the boy, the box and other items, which we gave out, but insisted that because it's a very serious case, we need to have the boy in school to give testimony so that we can know time.
The incident is said to have occurred and have not seen any indication of foul play. This footage obtained from NTV only shows the outside of the dorms. The head teacher maintains that they would not cover up for the culprit and are trying to get to the bottom of the matter as soon as possible.
We sympathize with the situation. He has been our student. We would also not want to keep the culprit in school. We have 1,200 students here. That's a big number. And there is no way we would keep the culprit in school if we knew him.
The onus will now be on the Ministry of Education and the investigative agencies to analyze what happened here on the 30th of January at Aquinas High School, Nairobi. Ngena Kirori, NTV.
And let's stick with education matters in school and to another disturbing story. A Form 2 student died at Pemwai Girls High School in Baringo in a case of suspected negligence. Students at the school protested after the death of their colleague, accusing the management of failing to take necessary measures after the student's illness was reported. Meanwhile, students of Sabor High School, also in Baringo, held a demonstration citing lack of water at their school after a river they depended on dried up. Gabriel Kudaka has more details.
Could just consider that girl for a little bit.
Moments after the death of their colleague, the students from Pemwai Girls High School are said to have left the institution and trekked for over 10 kilometers through the night before converging here at Kabarnet Stadium. They claim the Form 2 student Faith Karonei, who had complained of chest pains, was not attended to even after the matter had been reported to the administration.
Someone can be sick for 1 month. Na chukuliwe anything. Hivi venye unatuona, we are mourning our dear sister. Siana mwenye hakuwa na hatia.
Parents who joined their children at Kabarnet Stadium after hearing of the incident called for thorough investigations into the matter to ascertain the cause of Faith's death.
The death of this girl that they have come to Kabarnet to protest is not the start of the problems that these students have been going through. The death of the student was only a trigger of the problems that they have been going through for many years, and no one has been addressing them.
Vile tumesikia wakiongea, tumeona ya kwamba kuna negligence kwa shule. Sababu wanafunzi wanapopeana shida zao, wale ambao wameachiliwa kazi hawachukulii maanane, mpaka tumepoteza a very precious life.
Ministry of Education iweze kuongea na wale counselors ili waweze kucancel wa watoto, sababu they are traumatized. Ukiona watoto tumekuwa kuanzia na unaona wanalia.
That even now as we are gathered here,
officials from the education office called on the parents and students to be calm to allow for investigations.
We have not heard from the school. We have heard from them. Okay? That's why I'm telling you, I don't have those facts.
Meanwhile, students from Sabor Mixed Secondary School, also from Baringo Central, trekked for about 30 kilometers in a bid to seek audience with the county education office due to prolonged water shortage at their school. They were directed to Kabarnet Stadium to wait for the relevant authorities. Gabriel Kudaka, NTV.
And 4 rogue police officers attached to the DCI office in Langata and who were arrested on charges of robbery with violence were released on a cash bail of 300,000 shillings each. The 4 are accused of abducting a man at the Next Gen Mall on February 6th and robbed him of cash. NTV's Brian Obuye has the details.
A police parade at the DCI headquarters along Kiambu Road placed Tom Omondi Otieno, Anthony Muvaka Mwanza, Stephen Wambua, and Homa Bay-born Kennedy Omondi Odero at the center of unsettling crimes committed by law enforcement. According to a police report, it began on the 6th of February at noon when a man who had requested for a taxi on the busy Mombasa Road was accosted by 4 men. He was then bundled into a Subaru which had 5 occupants and who demanded money from him. While in the vehicle, a man who appeared to be in charge and now identified as Corporal Tom Otieno forcefully transferred 40,000 shillings from the man's mobile money account to his own account. The police say the rogue cops then drove the man to his apartment and robbed him of an additional $2,400 or about 273,000 shillings before dropping him off along Mombasa Road after the 2-hour ordeal. In an unexpected twist, the victim claimed that when he went to report the crime at the Akila police post in South Sea, Nairobi, he found the vehicle the men used to abduct him parked right outside. Only then did it dawn on him that the man that had robbed him were police officers. He then reported the matter to the Serious Crimes Unit of the DCI, leading to the arrests days later. The DCI admit that the men are police officers attached to the Langata office. The suspects have been charged with robbery with violence. They were released on a cash bail of 300,000 shillings each or a bond of 500,000 shillings each.
This is one of the most serious offenses, a capital offense, calling for a death sentence. And this is one of the considerations the court has to bear in mind while setting the bond. The state does not oppose bond, and even while taking into considerations the submissions by the advocate, the court will not give very lenient terms.
Brian Obuya, NTV.
And health matters now. The government of India is set to partner with the Kenyan government to improve health services in the country to make healthcare affordable to low-income Kenyans. Speaking at his residence in Nairobi last evening, the Indian High Commissioner to Kenya said it's time for the two levels of government to partner and provide affordable health services to the locals.
On a mutually agreed basis, on mutually agreed terms and conditions, I think we can add these traditional systems of medicine, cooperation in this sector, in our larger healthcare cooperation. I think it's a win-win situation. And this system of medicine also is a low-cost solution. Low-cost solution using locally available resources.
And the government has assured development partners that it has made elaborate plans to ensure a peaceful handover to whoever will form the next government. Cabinet Secretary for Interior, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, who met with representatives from various countries and organizations, has said that enough security will be mobilized to provide adequate support to the IEBC in the run-up to the August 9th elections.
Given assurances to our partners that as a country we are ready to proceed and facilitate the IEBC to conduct elections. The agencies that have got the constitutional mandate to facilitate the IEBC are here. As for the conduct of the general elections, that is the matter of the IEBC because it's an independent constitutional institution, but we have given assurances that we will do our part and we will continue to ensure that the country remains peaceful and stable and is prepared effectively for the transition.
For us partners as a group to interact very closely during these election times and to better understand how the government is organizing itself to achieve its results and bring continuity to our process. We've been all engaged a lot in investing in this country, investment, private sector, development agenda, and we want to continue this in a peaceful manner, in a stable environment.
All right, and of course, today it's all about the HIV burden in the country, and of course, a number of things that we need to go through, and especially that report that that Kenya has officially attained the 90-90-90 target. Is it true? Have we or have we not? What statistics were used to determine whether we have attained the 90-90-90 target or not? Well, let's delve more into the HIV burden in the country, and of course, to help us with the discussion, we have Doreen Moracha, who is the founder founder. I am a beautiful story as well as a HIV advocate. Thank you very much for making time for us today. Looking lovely. And then Dr. Irene Mukui, who's the head of disease, HIV and drugs for neglected diseases initiative. Good morning, Dr. Irene. It's so good to see you once again.
Good morning.
It's a long time. And we also have Timothy Wafula, who's the head of HIV and TB at Kellen. Good morning, Timothy, joining us via Zoom this morning. How are you doing? Timothy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us as well. And clearly there's a theme going on around here. That is all red. Timothy, you did not get the memo apparently. But it's so good to have all of you today to just discuss this very important subject, if I can say. And let's just first of all understand where we are at, as far as HIV and AIDS, because again, we've made strides, like we said when we started the show. We've seen a reduction in terms of the new infections, but is this enough? And I just want to start with you, Dr. Irene. Gauging the way things are, and then COVID-19 came, created a number of disruptions as well. So where are we at?
Kenya has done well.
Yeah.
Very well.
Yeah.
Compared to a lot of other countries, and of course in line with the 1990 targets. So the 1990 means that you need to have at least 90% of people who are estimated to be living with HIV know their HIV diagnosis, so they've gotten a test and they know that they're positive, and then 90% of those should be at least on treatment. And then 90% of those who are on treatment should achieve viral suppression, which is the goal of treatment. Yeah. Once you put somebody on treatment, what you actually want is for the treatment to lower the level of the virus to a level that cannot be detected. So Kenya has done very well. I can't say whether we've met the 1999 targets.
Doreen is very vocal about this. Like,
Doreen is going to talk about it, but Kenya has actually done very well. We have, out of the 1.4 million people who are on treatment, we actually have about 1.2 million people on treatment, which I think is extremely good progress given where we've come from.
Yes, yeah. I mean, since again the onset of the same up until now, I agree. We've made a number of, like, a huge progress. But the question is this enough? Because again, we have a target to meet that is by 2030.
So we are actually moving to the 95 targets by 2030. So the 1990 targets were targets for 2020. Which I think that globally nobody met the targets, neither did we meet by 2020. But I think we have over 80% of people on treatment in the country. And now we are moving to the 95 by 2030. So we still have some way to go. But the more you have done, the harder it becomes to get the remaining few. So I think that's the bit that the countries is probably still dealing with, have to deal with. Yes.
Okay. All right. Because some might be like, so we have not achieved the 90, and now we have another target that is 95. Can we just first of all deal with this 90, and then we'll focus on 95. Anyway, I'd love to hear what Timothy has to say about the same. But Doreen, you are living positively, and you have been vocal about it. You're, really championing for, first of all, not only the rights, but also make sure that everybody has, access to treatment and all those things. So then when did it all start? When did you realize that you are HIV positive?
I didn't realize.
Okay. Oh no, when were you diagnosed?
The people in my life realized first.
The people in your life realized first.
Yeah,
okay.
So my parents knew I was HIV positive when I was 8 years old.
All right.
But I was born with it. And then they told me when I was 13.
Okay.
So, and also that was this time I started treatment officially. So I have been on ARVs for 17 years now.
Okay.
And I've lived with HIV for, let's say, 29 and a half years. Yes. Because I have another half to go before we complete the 29 years. So, basically, I started talking about my HIV status publicly in 2015. And also when I formed the initiative, I Am a Beautiful Story, to leverage on the lived experiences of people living with HIV, and also to normalize the HIV conversation as well, because as you started saying earlier, that we have a lot of stigma and discrimination still almost 41 years, because since HIV came to the world, it's now 41 years.
Yeah.
So the stigma and discrimination is still there. But with more people coming out, more people speaking about the stories, I think it's making it look like it's a normal health condition. And that is, I think, the beauty of it all.
Yeah. So you told me, like, among your siblings, you're the only one who's living positively.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And probably someone is watching and thinking, wait, what? How is that possible?
So I also don't know how that is possible, but I think my whole lived experience is based on the fact that my parents are a discordant couple, in that my dad does not have HIV and my mom is HIV positive. And among my siblings, it's me and my late brother, who is the fourth born now, who were born with HIV. So the first born, second born are negative, and our last born is negative as well.
Yeah. Okay. And I think we need to understand more about the discordancy dynamic, Dr. Irene, don't you think, before we engage with Timothy? Just explain to people, because a lot of people have find it very difficult, you know, and I think this has also brought about, you know, a lot of stigma, especially when it comes to the couples as well.
Yeah, so the thing about discordancy is, Maura has explained, so you can actually have two people who are having sexual relations, and one is positive and one is negative, and you don't transmit to the negative person. And it's, so that's the discordance. And it's related to many factors. I think part of it is by chance. It's just by the fact that even if you have HIV, you know, it's not 100% transmission.
Okay.
So, for example, in the case of mother-to-child transmission, which I guess that's the case with Maura, is if you don't do anything, you don't give the mother any treatment, you don't give the baby prophylaxis, which what happens these days, the transmission is about 40%, okay, if the child is breastfed. So you still have another 60%, you know, chances where there is no transmission. So the same thing with the sexual transmission, for example. So you have couples who are in discordant relationship. One is HIV positive, one is HIV negative. Of course, if the positive partner is not on treatment, there are chances that they will transmit, but the chances are not always 100%. Now, if you, for example, have the positive partner on treatment and the viral load becomes, you know, undetectable, literally the chances of transmission become zero. So that's the thing. So it's related to the amount of virus in the person's body. It's related on whether there are other, you know, factors that are affecting a person's immunity. But basically, that's what discordancy is all about. And it's there are many couples who are actually discordant and have been together for a long time.
Yes. Yeah. And again, still healthy, you know,
absolutely.
As healthy as they can be.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, Timothy, again, Dr. Irene mentioned the fact that, again, Kenya, you know, we're doing so well. We're doing very, very well. But of course, you know, Kellen, we all know, you know, mostly champions for, you know, people's rights, and especially as far as access to quality healthcare is concerned. Where do you feel we are at the moment as a country, and that is in the fight against HIV and AIDS?
Okay, thank you, Winnie, and also, thank you, Maureen and Irene. So, one, I can say that regarding the legal front, we have the right legal framework currently to fight HIV. So, of course, we have a very strong constitution that provides all the rights, the right to health. We do have the HIV AIDS Prevention and Control Act 2006, and also at the regional level, we also have an East Africa HIV Act. So from the legal point of view, we do have a strong legal framework to assist us with the fight against HIV. So we can say that currently a lot of gains have been lost maybe in the past 1 year, and we cannot say that we have achieved the 1990 target, mainly due to now issues regarding implementation of certain policies and guidelines. So, for instance, I will cite the stalemate between KEMSA and USAID last year that saw us have an acute shortage of
All right, Timothy. All right, so Timothy would want to sort out a bit of your audio, and then we'll come back to you. And that is as far as the strain that again happened between USAID and Kenya, and that is last year. But even up until last year, that is around November, there of course there's still cases of again no drugs, and especially when it comes to the children as well. And we need to understand where we are at with the same. So let's sort your audio, and then we'll come back to you, Timothy. But for you, Doreen, so you told me again, got to a point where you stopped using your medication. And at what point and why?
In 2011, I stopped taking my ARVs. Well, because we had gone to Loliondo. When I say we, I mean my mom and I.
All right.
I convinced her because we saw the Loliondo story on TV, and I was like, this is what is going to make us HIV free.
Yeah.
So we traveled all the way there. We drank the cup, or rather the herbal medication, and we believed that we had indeed become HIV free. So when we came back, we both stopped taking our medication, but my mom stopped for like I think around 3 months, but I went for 2 years without being on treatment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you notice any changes?
Of course. Of course, when you are taking treatment, the treatment is supposed to lower your viral load, which means it also reduces your chances of getting opportunistic infections.
Absolutely.
But now, if you are not on treatment, the opportunistic infections attack you every time.
Yeah.
So I got TB, I got pneumonia, I got herpes zoster. I was dealing with so much at the same time.
Okay.
And then now things were dramatic. My mouth was swollen. It was bad.
Okay.
So the doctor looked at me and he was like, why did you stop taking your treatment? And I never told my doctors that actually it's because we had gone to Loliondo and we believed we were both HIV negative.
Yeah.
I just told him I was tired. But also the treatment fatigue had kicked in.
Yep.
So I was looking at my treatment and I'm like, why? You know, nowadays we're taking just 1 pill. But then we were taking, I think, 3.
Yes.
It had reduced again to 3. So still 3 is a huge number.
Every day.
So
yes.
I was tired. And I told him I was just tired and I wanted a break. But sadly the break ended badly. Yeah.
Okay. You were not okay. Opportunistic infections
infections came in. Like, and the thing is, when you stop taking the treatment, the opportunistic infections will always come.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Your mom, did she experience any?
My mom, weirdly enough, she did not experience opportunistic infections
Within the 3-month
because I
period,
think because she stopped for a shorter time, went to hospital and told the counselor, just test, like she went to some visit, she told the man, just test me. I don't need counseling, I don't need anything, I don't want to confirm whether I'm positive or not. So the test of course came out positive. And then the man was like, so now you can start your treatment. She was like, I've been on treatment, you don't worry. And then that story.
I just took a break.
Yeah, so she came back home and told me we need to go back to our treatment. Yeah. But I was still in that denial of maybe I should give it a little bit of time. So yeah, so the time went into 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And of course, all this time dealing with a lot of, again, opportunistic infections and all those things. But can we address, again, stigma? Did you face any form of stigma, either as a family or as an individual?
The first stigma I faced was from my family. Because, the thing is, when I got diagnosed, this is a new diagnosis. And my mom decided to tell everyone in her family that my daughter is HIV positive. And I am HIV positive as well. So they have some medics in her family. And she thought that was supposed to be her support system.
Yeah.
But for some reason, they looked at us from a point of, that time HIV was a death sentence. And even my doctors did not believe that I would make it like all the way to see even my 13th birthday, because they told my parents, honestly, we would really love to give you hope, but we don't even know how she has made it this far. So we can just tell you, go home, love her and take care of her, but we can't really tell you much because there was no ARVs. There were no ARVs, literally nothing. Yeah. So I went home. My parents took me home. And so I think because of that support, that psychosocial support that you need from your family, they disclosed to our relatives. Yeah. And so some of them, of course, did not take it like so these people have HIV, they're going to die at some point. Another time, even the issue of sharing utensils, the issue of greeting people, it used to be taken like if you greet somebody and you have HIV, you're going to transmit.
You're going to transmit
Yeah,
it,
so to them, it was like, So we used to visit and you find you have utensils on your own. And they will even disinfect the utensils, some sun dry them so that it's like to kill the virus, of which it's not even transmittable through the utensil, but that is what happened. So it reached a point that my mom became very uncomfortable even visiting her relatives. So she was like, I prefer we do not visit them. And even if we're visiting them, it's like short visits. So that, so that was the first stigma. And no, it's bad when the first stigma comes from a family. Because these are the same people who are supposed to be there for you. And then now, the world, now when, by the time I was finishing Form 4, was now when I kind of now started feeling how living with HIV was such a big deal. Because before that, it was just normal, like just the only people who know is the family, and if they don't want to associate with us, it's okay.
That's all right,
But with the rest of the world, yes, HIV has changed a lot. Like right now, we see at least some interactions and people, but there's still something, some fear, some shame. So when I was trying to disclose, like maybe in dating and relationships, there's a time I was left in Ngong Road just because I told the person I am living with HIV. He did not believe me. He actually thought I was saying it so that I can like say no to him. So we decided on our first date we were going to go to a VCT.
Okay.
That was the weirdest I think first date I ever right? So, and then we tested. Of course, my test was positive. His was negative. So, and it was actually 13th, like the 13th before Valentine's. So it was a very bad day in general. So coming back, I think he was unable to like drive all the way to town. He was like, let me just leave you here. I have to finish up some work at the office and then so see, we shall talk. So we never talked.
Oh man.
So that ideally showed that there is, as much as we try and say, there are so many discordant couples, yes. But by the time you're reaching that point of being in a stable discordant relationship,
it's difficult.
You have had to deal with people because you must meet somebody who is very open-minded and is very progressive and knows what is happening in the current HIV situation.
Exactly.
But most people who are still back in the 2000s and they're like, HIV.
No. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dr. Irene, where would you say this level of stigma comes from? Because again, like Doreen says, 41 years later, there's a lot of campaigns, you know, around HIV and, you know, transmission, ways of transmission and all those things, but still high levels of stigma as well. So where does it stem from then? And especially now, in this day and age. Back then we could understand, you know, there was not so much information about HIV and AIDS. But now?
Wow, it's a difficult question to answer, and I think it's related to the whole topic around the transmission.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it today, if you get a diagnosis of cancer, somebody's going to tell you pole.
True.
And be really, really sympathetic with you, which is very different from HIV. I think part of it is related to the fact that as a society, and I don't think it's just as a society, even in the developed world, I tell you that stigma is still there, maybe to a lesser extent, but I think it's related to the whole topic of around sexual transmission, the fact that generally sex is not a topic that we are too open to talk about. There are many, I think, socio-cultural dimensions that are attached to the whole topic around sex. So now if you have, I mean, it's like STIs. If you have sexually transmitted infection, I mean, please, people look at you.
Oh, yes.
It was associated with promiscuity. So I think it's so difficult because of that to completely do away with stigma. Of course, things have improved. I think for me, it's amazing that Maura can sit here and talk. And many other people talk, but there are many, many other people who cannot talk to date. So I think there's been progress, but there's still so much. Part of it is misconception. People still are not convinced that if I eat from the same plate with Maura, I'm not going to get infected. I mean, if I use a towel that she has used, I'm not going to get infected. So I think people still doubt And then people don't really want to talk about it. It's a hush topic. So I think it's pretty unfortunate because the stigma contributes to many problems. It contributes to people not seeking care. It contributes to a lot of stress. You know, for people who are living with HIV, you are not going to talk about it to people. I really applaud the people who've come out to speak, because it requires a completely different level of bravery and I think courage to speak out.
And also, you know, the aspect of then mother-to-child transmission. I know, like, children is so much of your field, as well as, again, neglected diseases, you know, but just to make it clear, and especially for people when it comes to transmission, first of all, and just with a special focus of mother-to-child transmission, just to make it clear for people that, listen, drinking from the same cup will not, you know, you will not get infected.
So exactly. So, I mean, drinking from the same cup is, you're not going to get infected. You know, and it's related to the fact that, I mean, saliva, for example, has very, I mean, literally low levels of the virus. So it's not going to get transmitted. Sweat is not going to transmit. So if you touch somebody's sweat, you're not going to get the transmission. So the mother-to-child transmission, so, you know, it basically means a mother who is HIV positive can transmit the virus. In many ways, in multiple ways. It can happen during pregnancy itself, you know, as the baby feeds from the mother, literally. So it can happen during pregnancy. It can happen during delivery, especially with all the mix of fluids and everything. So it can actually happen during delivery. And then it can happen during breastfeeding through breast milk. So to different extents at the different stages, both prior to delivery and after delivery, that can happen. I think the positive thing is that you can literally lower the chances of transmission to close to zero with the current interventions. So many years back, I think when the HIV treatment started, you know, you would give, you know, antiretroviral medicines for a certain duration of time. Now there are better medicines. And actually what we now recommend is, as soon as you diagnose a mother to be HIV positive, put them on treatment. And if the viral load is actually suppressed, so you test and you cannot detect them, they're going to deliver a negative baby. And even after delivery, so it's a combination of give the mother treatment. Right now, also the baby usually receives some ARVs for at least for Kenya. It's up to the time that they complete breastfeeding to minimize the chances. But it's really positive news. So, I mean, in essence, you can actually bring the transmission from mother to child to, you know, close to zero, which countries in the developed world have managed to do. Some of them have not reported in mother-to-child transmission for years.
That's good. We hope that we'll get there,
we hope to get there
as a country at some point. All right, so we literally have, like, I think 2 more minutes to go before we go on a break. And of course, Timothy is back. And Timothy, of course, you were talking about the legal framework, which is, you know, again, currently here in the country, and we've made a lot of gains as far as that is concerned. Would you just take us through that a little bit more, and then we'll take a break?
Yeah, glad to be back. So yeah, as I noted is that we do have a good legal framework to assist us with the fight against HIV. Of course, the constitutional rights, the constitutional right to health, and the attendant rights there in information, privacy, and all these, such that if all these rights are respected and promoted and upheld, then we are at a stronger position, because I think this is noting the importance, I think as Doreen has noted, the importance of respecting the rights of people living with HIV if we are to make any strides in the fight to deal with stigma, discrimination, and to ensure that there's greater access to health services. So that being one point, also, as Dr. Irene has noted, that treatment is actually very important, and we need not be in a position where we are having missed opportunities. And as I started noting, last year we did have experienced shortages of HIV commodities, which I think really set us back. And I think that is something that really needs to be taken care of, or needs to be a priority concern. So even currently, we do have reports that there is an acute, for instance, shortage of condoms, testing maybe is not being conducted optimally, shortage of prophylaxis for prevention of mother-to-child transmission, viral load testing maybe not happening the way it's supposed to be happening. And I think, as Dr. Maureen has indicated, it's important that treatment continues if we are able to, we will be able to achieve the target, so that we ensure, for instance, there's prevention, there's a sustained, that there's prevention, there's access to medicines, and also there's suppressed viral load for people living with HIV. And of course now, just ensuring that there's enabling a legal environment that protects and promotes the rights, that we do not have instances of stigma and discrimination. So maybe in just 2 minutes, I will mention that, and as we continue the conversation.
Yeah, and of course, I'm happy that you're here as well to just, again, help us with the discussion around the same. And of course, yes, you're right. I mean, there are reports about condom shortage, and of course, on 13th of February 2022, of course, the entire globe, of course, marked that is International Condom Day. And of course, those very interesting statistics that, of course, we'll come back and look at it after this very short break. But of course, remember, the question that we're asking you today is, again, as far as the efforts that have been put aside to make sure that we end HIV and AIDS, are they enough? And that is the question that we're asking you. So feel free to interact with us. If you want to call in, feel free to do so. And we'll be looking at your feedback during the show. But for now, let's take a break. See you right after. All right, welcome back. Glad you're still with us. The show is Your World, and today it's all about the HIV burden in the country. And of course, the question that we're asking you is the interventions that are being implemented right now in the country. Do you feel that they are enough? That is, as far as the fight against HIV and AIDS. There you go. Are interventions currently applied to end HIV and AIDS? Are they enough? So keep sending your tweets at NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie. Remember to use the hashtag Your World. And of course, we'll be sampling your views as we continue with the discussion. But right about now, just to give you a bit of perspective as far as how we are doing as a country in terms of the number of people who are living with HIV and AIDS, and of course, the number of new infections, number of antiretroviral therapy. There you go. So at the moment, so the number of persons living with HIV and AIDS in the country stands at 1,435,271. And the number of new infections reported as of now is 32,027. And remember, this is as of 2021. And then the number of persons on ART, or that is antiretroviral therapy, stands at 1,199,101. And of course, at the same time, we have lost the number of people to HIV and AIDS, and right now the number stands at 19,486. So again, one more needs to be done, because there are a number of issues that need to be dealt with, so that we make sure that we attain the 90-90-90, because we're still asking, have we not attained the 90 target? And of course, what needs to be done to make sure that, remember, we have another goal, that is 95-95-95 by the year 2030. So will we achieve that by the year 2030? Well, it is a matter of wait and see, but also something needs to be done to make sure that we attain this. And of course, to help us with the discussion, we have Doreen Moracha, who's the founder. I Am a Beautiful Story. and as well as an HIV advocate. We also have Dr. Irene Mukui, who is the head of disease, that is HIV and Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative. And we also have Timothy Wafula, who's head of HIV and TB, that is at Carlin. So, Doreen, I am really curious in terms of the 1990, because we've talked about a lot, and the fact that you are here championing, you know, for the rights, especially for persons living with HIV and AIDS, making sure that we have enough, you know, treatment for them and all those things. Since you started publicly talking about this, talking about your status up until now, right? As a person, have you maybe noticed a number of changes? Because you're advocating for this, you also have your own initiative. Have you seen changes really happening? Drastic changes that you can quantify and say, by the way, we have done something?
Yeah, I can say we have done something.
Okay.
We, as a country, also, the good thing about Kenya is we really love accepting new interventions. So when new interventions come, like when PrEP came, PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis, is to for HIV prevention among HIV negative people. So when PrEP came, Kenya was among the first countries to take it. PEP as well, and with there's also a new ring called the dapivirine ring. There's also the issue of untransmittable, U equals U, and undetectable equals untransmittable. So all of these interventions that keep coming up, and even new treatment guidelines as they come up, Kenya really does take them and even adopts them in our treatment policies and guidelines.
All right.
So on paper, we are doing very well.
I feel there's a bat in your statement. It's like, yes, we are.
On paper, we are doing very well.
Yes.
And even when it comes to new, towards talking about HIV-related stigma, we have leveraged on HIV champions, and also like ensuring that we're even going the digital way. Though digital advocacy started picking up more in 2020 when COVID hit, and we needed all the psychosocial support. But it's still not what is supposed to be. Why I say this is because when we started, because I was among the first people who started with the HIV rather the response, in that we used to be given treatment, there was nutrition supplement, there was proper psychosocial support. And when I say proper, in that even when you miss going to hospital, a social worker will be sent to your house to come and confirm what is happening. So like that kind of, and people living with HIV used to feel like they belong to a community, like I'm not doing this thing on my own. But as time went by, it's like it started like, if you're living with HIV, you just take your treatment and move on.
Like it's all on you.
And it's all on you. So now a lot of people keep struggling. And now that struggle is where the problem is. Because this struggle is the same one that people start treatment, reach a point and they're like, no, I'm tired of this thing. You see? Because those 19,000 deaths are not supposed to be happening in 2021. They are not. Because HIV so far, there is treatment, there is prevention. So why are people dying from the same? It is not supposed to be happening. It means that there is a gap somewhere. There is some blind spot that we are missing, and one of it is psychosocial support. We don't have enough of that. A lot of people feel like, I am on my own. And when you feel like you're on your own with a lifelong health condition, it's not something that you talk about. It's not something you can walk and tell your family members, hey, I got diagnosed with HIV today. They will look at you like, okay, because there are so many people who are living with HIV and the only person who knows is them and the doctor at the hospital.
Absolutely.
There are so many people who literally, a person lives in Kisumu but takes their treatment in Kakamega because they're afraid people in Kisumu know them. So why are we losing these people in some sort of like self-stigma spot, in that these people who are supposed to be part of a community are supposed to be helped in walking this journey, because this is a lifelong journey.
It is.
And if you don't have somebody to walk it with you, you will get fatigued. That is why I reached a point, I looked at Loliondo gave me hope, and I decided this is the way to go. You see, that is, people keep getting lied to. There are fake cures all over the place, but we will not be going that way if indeed we were going the right direction. The right direction means we are doing everything, including having proper commodities in our hospitals. In that, if I have reached a point, because right now we are going into something called differentiated service delivery, where I don't have to go to the hospital. My drugs can be, if I live like in Nairobi, my drugs can be delivered in a pharmacy where I go, take them. The only time I go to the hospital is to take my viral load and blood works. If we are like in a rural setup, one of the people living with HIV gets to host us as a community. We talk, we go through that. But we cannot reach that point if we don't have treatment. Sure. Because treatment ideally is what brings us together, is the number one thing. Drugs. Number two, psychosocial support. Number three is now where we go into prevention, whereby if we have to prevent HIV and we need to reach the 95% goal of ensuring that everybody knows the HIV status in our population, we need prevention. The first form of prevention, which is the most traditional, has been here for a while, is the condom. Kenya does not have condoms.
And that is just like, it's just unbelievable to think about the fact that we do not have condoms in the country at the moment, you know. And Timothy was actually talking about this earlier on. And Timothy, I want to bring you in, you know, for this, because like basic things that we need in the country, and this is as far as either prevention or treatment of HIV and AIDS, you know, are not there. And like we said earlier on, last year around November, I mean, has been, you know, for a while, but last year, November, is when we had a lot of cases, and that is, there were no HIV testing kits in, you know, and especially when it comes to like viral load testing kits as well in the hospital. Now, condoms, you know, something as basic as condoms, we do not have this. So again, you dealing in the legal, you know, framework and just championing for, you know, the rights of persons living with HIV and AIDS, and even the fact that we need to prevent, you know, new infections. What do you have to say to this? Does this sadden you or surprise you?
Yes. So this is a saddening scenario, noting that the first thing that people living with HIV need is access to treatment, as has been re-emphasized here time and again. And again, meeting the legal threshold. If you're talking about the right to health, you cannot talk about the right to health if you do not have access to health services. You do not have access to health commodities. You do not have access to quality commodities. So, as you've rightly put, last year and the year before, we can say that to a great extent, due to the COVID pandemic, we also saw a certain focus and shift to COVID in itself and neglecting of, for instance, issues relating to HIV. So that was something that should not have happened. Even if we're in the middle of a public health pandemic, other services should not be interrupted, should not stop, as we address a public health emergency. So we should not be creating addressing one emergency and at the same time neglecting and causing more harm to the other sectors. So, of course, you've rightly put that the bulk of last year we saw an acute shortage of commodities, and this one, as Doreen was saying, if you are talking about acute shortage of commodities and you have to go to the facility so many times, you do not have the right treatment with you, you do not have access to viral load testing, you do not know whether the medication that you're taking is actually working. For children, the prophylaxis that is required to prevent mother to child was also in shortage. And currently, we cannot say that the situation has greatly improved. We are also seeing a scenario where we can say to an extent donors are indicating that we've attained a status whereby we should support ourselves. Do we have the capacity to support ourselves? If the donors, for instance, stop giving us the commodities, will we be able to ensure that there's continued uninterrupted access to HIV commodities to people living with HIV? Or will we be in a scenario whereby we neglect the population and lead to greater harm to the community as well as the general population?
And Dr. Nadine, can we just touch on children as well? Because again, still on last year, you know, the advancements that have been made, absolutely yes, and especially when it comes to like treatment, prevention, and all those things. But when it comes to the children, very little, you know, has been done. Can we just address the children issue, and especially, you know, ones who are living with HIV and AIDS?
So the issue of children is complex. First, I want to comment on something that Doreen said.
Yes.
Because, okay, so I agree with her. I think Kenya is actually considered an early adopter country in the sense that whenever new interventions that are supported by science come out, Kenya is very quick to adopt those interventions. And I think that's partly because of, as Timothy says, of a facilitative policy environment, but also we've had huge donor support. You know, the Global Fund, the US government, and many other, you know, the UN. So that whole combination has actually enabled. So I wouldn't say that it's only on paper.
Okay.
I actually think we've made great strides. I mean, listen, I worked in the Ministry of Health. When I went in, we had about 300,000 people on treatment. When I was leaving, we had almost 1 million people on treatment. So we've made great advances. Children traditionally has been a challenge. And it's not only in Kenya, I can tell you. So we have our own implementation issues, I think, in Kenya, but we also have global issues. So you will find, for example, the organization I work with actually considers pediatric HIV neglected. And the reason why we consider it neglected is because the development of treatments for children is much slower compared to adults. So scientists will do trials and test drugs among adults way before they can do it in children. And this is a historical issue because you want to make sure they are safe before you test them in children, because children are considered vulnerable, and therefore you sort of protect vulnerable populations. You protect pregnant mothers, you protect children. So that's been an issue. So the development of children, I can tell you, for example, when I got into the program, I think many years, more than a decade ago, we were breaking tablets for children. We were breaking adult tablets for children. So things have changed. We now have treatments that are designed for children, dissolvable tablets, syrups. We've actually gone out of syrups a lot because they used to be bulky. So there's been a lot of treatment. We didn't have as many children on treatment. Now we have, I think, a significant number of children, but we still have challenges with children. We still have fewer favorable medications for children compared to adults. So the development still takes a lag, you know. And then, of course, there are so many other issues that are related to children. You know, they depend on somebody. There's a lot of orphanhood in this country, especially related to HIV, you know, from years back. So we have seen many circumstances where the social circumstances, which brings me, I think, to what Mora was alluding to, the psychosocial support. Children face serious psychosocial support issues. They're dependent on somebody to give their medication. So if you don't give them medicine, they won't. The parents are away, so they're left with a caregiver or a house help who probably doesn't know the child's status, won't necessarily give the treatment at the right time. Or if they're orphaned, they're under the care of a grandmother who probably can't. So children face so many problems. And then there is abuse. You know, there's actually abuse, the stigma related to HIV, and some children actually experience abuse. So even in terms of access to treatment, globally and even in Kenya, you have a smaller proportion of children accessing treatment to date. Children are less likely to suppress the virus for many, many reasons. One is just all the problems related to adherence, to the fact that they don't have, you know, medicines that are as friendly. Right now, as she said, an adult right now needs to take 1 tablet once a day. It's a small tablet once a day. Children are still having to take, especially the young ones, are still having to take either 2 tablets, or they still have to take a combination of syrups. So there's more sensitivity right now, and there's more development happening right now for children, but they still have to take more medicines, you know, 2 tablets, 3 tablets sometimes compared to adults. So that's a problem in itself. And then you have to deal with all the psychosocial support issues that children face. So it's a major problem. So we consider it as a neglected disease, especially in drug development, but also in the challenges that children face. And then stigma in school. We have not even talked about school. You are in school, you are taking medicines, the other children get to know about it. You face a lot of stigma. The teaching fraternity might not also be very supportive. So So there are so many challenges. I know that, for example, the Ministry of Health has been trying to do some work with the Ministry of Education, but we still are not there, especially in taking care of children who are within educational institutions. Sometimes they don't get time off to go for their clinic appointments, so that brings a challenge. So I think the issue of children, in my mind, requires a lot more thought and a lot more social protection and support than you actually provide for adults. I'm not saying adults, you don't get it.
They can somewhat take care of themselves now.
But for sure you require that for a child, you know, to take them through disclosure, for them to accept, deal with it.
It's just a lot, I would feel,
It's a lot.
for a child.
It's
you know?
a lot for
By
a
the time a
child.
child gets to that point of acceptance,
Absolutely.
number one, first of all, even to understand why, right? And then get to acceptance, and then adherence to medication. Again, like you said, it just takes takes a lot. And Timothy, I'd want to bring you in right now, because again, the fact that again these children dependent, you know, on, let's say, their parents and all those things, but now they do not also have like access to, you know, the required medications and stuff. I mean, as an organization, so then where do you come in to make sure that as much as yes, you know, you're here championing for the rights, but also not forgetting the children as well?
Thank you for that. So on the aspect of children, one thing that maybe we also need to know is that as per the Constitution, the access to health services for children is an immediate right. So you will note that for adults, Article 43, the right to health is progressive, that the state has to take measures progressively to realize this right. But when it comes to children, this is immediate. So we are at a situation whereby the state or the government needs to take immediate measures to ensure that access to health services for children is a reality. So that is now, I think, the point whereby what we've been seeing last year, whereby there's been shortage of test kits and prophylaxis when it comes to children. I think that we can call it like a very gross violation of the right to health of children, and needs to be addressed.
Okay, all right. And then Doreen, so you still have concerns about the same, and that is what you were saying. It's just basically on paper, but really we see, you know, very little being done to make sure that some of these things are implemented. And last year, again, people living with HIV and AIDS actually wrote to President Uhuru Kenyatta to intervene, but most of them saying their petitions, especially Ministry of Health, National AIDS and STA Control Program, all of them have been ignored. Do you feel the same?
You know, last year, I think since 2020 when the concerns started, and there was the first shortage was with Septrain, then it came to ARVs shortage, then now the commodities part. So we kept writing letters. Started with the Ministry of Health. We wrote, I think, around 3 letters. None of them were responded to. We now did a peaceful demonstration there. They assured us that things were going to come back to normal and we should not worry, but still nothing went back to normal. We wrote to the Parliament, we took a letter to Parliament, to the Senate, and even to now the President himself, but still nothing was done. So part of the problem I know is with COVID, because before, by 2019 we were doing well. Like we had even moved into like giving people drugs for as long as 6 months. So we were doing well. And then now when COVID came, I think as a country, we started struggling to handle 2 pandemics at the same time. So we're like, these people, probably the government thought these people are used to living it like this. Let us give them a little break and then we will come back to them later. The problem is HIV didn't stop just because COVID came. So the new infection still went
it's
on.
Like, let me pause, my cousin is around.
Exactly. So the mother to child, you find, even going to hospital, and that was the time when hospitals were marked red zones. So I won't go to hospital if I'm pregnant to confirm whether I'm positive or not. So I will wait. And you see, the waiting means also putting the child at risk, because also during conception there is the aspect of getting infecting the child, as Dr. Irene said. So the thing is, I think the balance, striking the balance is where our problem came in. And now everything now went south very fast. So all of a sudden there were no testing kits. There were no, the people living with HIV were not being tested for viral load. And the ones that were being tested had a very huge backlog. So they had to put a pause in that, wait, let us finish the backlog first. So the same, you see, with this kind of things going on, sometimes a person will get the laxity, like, if I'm not being tested for viral load, I can just relax with this medication for a bit. You see, that is the mentality that goes into somebody. And when there are stockouts, people worry that there are stockouts. And when COVID came, the media was reporting, people were saying people living with HIV are most at risk because their viral load, their immune system is compromised. So I am worried there is no treatment. And I'm also worried about this pandemic. And also the pandemic has actually taken people living with HIV. So you cannot really, for you to give people living with HIV the confidence that we are really with you. We remember you. We remember this pandemic that has been with us forever. And we will put you still in the same loop as everybody else. Is by ensuring that the commodities are in place. That way I know that if I walk into a hospital, as a mother, I am getting the prophylaxis for my child. And I'm not being told, wah, itabidi mgawane. You see?
So we had a lot of cases.
Exactly.
Of the same
or you're being if your child is 6 months, you're told, hey, now at this point you will have to reconsider the breastfeeding part. You see, we don't have to put actually, I always say this. As a country, we have let down the children of this country. I know children are complex, but we have really let them down. One, because no child deserves to be born with HIV in 2022.
Absolutely.
None at all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Second, because we don't put in place prophylaxis. For us to eliminate mother to child, because we moved from prevention to now elimination, we need prophylaxis. That is the foundation of it all. If we don't have prophylaxis, then we cannot prevent.
Absolutely.
For us to be able to ensure that the children who are now already living with HIV are virally suppressed or attain a suppressed viral load, we need to give them better treatment. Right now there is dolutegravir for children, and they are saying it's a better regimen, tastes better, less harsher than the previous regimens. So they are rolling it out currently, and I am hoping that it is going to be sustainable, because rolling out is one thing. The sustainability part is also a whole other issue. But we need to really do right by children living with HIV, because they have now different issues. It's not like an adult who you can test and tell them you're living with HIV, and then you give them time, they go cry, scream, and then come back later and now say, now I can start treatment. A child already has that. They don't have the chance of being HIV negative at all. And as they're growing up in a society that already has stigma towards people living with HIV. This last week on Saturday, I lost a 19-year-old I was supporting because he refused to take his treatment completely.
I'm sorry.
He was born with HIV, and he was disclosed to, I think, he was not actually disclosed to, he found out in school. So the other kids were talking about it behind his back. So he went home and asked his dad, and then the dad was like, oh, you know, you had HIV. And so he stopped taking his treatment. So for 3 years, he has not been taking his treatment. And when he finally went to hospital, he had meningitis and he died. So you see, that is a case that would have been handled better. But still we keep doing wrong by children. So if we get it wrong by children, how are we going to get it right for adults? It's the same thing when it comes to mothers. We let some mothers go to the clinic at 8-9 months. And at 8-9 months, by this time, the virus has progressed. They are now already, like, they're in a position where there is a very huge chance the child might be born positive. Why are we not starting it from the beginning? Because if we start it like from the community health volunteers, we tell them, you are the people to know these pregnant women. Encourage them to start ANC early, because early ANC ideally means the child will not get HIV, or rather it has a reduced chance of the child getting HIV during conception and even during birth, because the mom is already on treatment. But then they wait. Some of them go to hospital at 9 months, And now even sometimes the doctors really just rely on God in such kind of scenarios, in that
Because
we
now
are
what
praying,
else
this
do you
child
do?
comes out
Yes.
negative, we give them prophylaxis, and then that prophylaxis is going to prevent this child. Because that is now the whole thing. So as much as, yes, we do well, we adopt policies very well, and with the advancements that keep coming, even right now I think we are moving into adapting the injectable PrEP.
Yes.
And like, we get excited about new things, but
then
the
again,
old
we
things
forget.
that are there, we just, it's like we forget about them for a moment, and then we
get
remember,
excited
oh,
about this
we
new
had
thing.
this, okay, now let us go back there. So I feel like there's like something that really goes on somewhere, like, so it's like we forget something a little bit, and then we remember, oh, we have to go back there, and then we go back and try and do it right, but maybe by the time we're trying to do it right, things have gone south. So the number one thing we need to put for us to reach now, let me put the 95.
Be a bit optimistic, like,
let me put the 95. And the question being, can we end AIDS by 2030? We can.
We can, yes.
But we need
the
goodwill.
The bat came out.
The goodwill, because that is one thing we don't have in fighting HIV in this country. We don't have goodwill. And from the political towards the implementing partners, we keep brushing each other the wrong way. And we forget that the 1.4 million Kenyans living with HIV is not a number, they're people.
They're people, yeah.
And the moment we start looking at them from a people perspective, then we will reach the 95. We will ensure that people know their status, their treatment, whether they're like testing, because nowadays we have the home tests where you can just test from home and you know your status and it's easy. So you don't have to walk into a traditional VCT. Increase uptake on that, whereby this person starts the treatment and they're like, I'm virally suppressed, because viral suppression takes around 3 to 6 months, and you're virally suppressed and your life is normal. And if you are virally suppressed, you are maintaining that viral suppression. Because once people reach the viral suppression part, I think we become comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm good, and then
celebrate for a moment and then you forget.
So the goodwill needs to really play a very huge part here.
And Dr. Irene, I just want to put this to you, because again, you also talked about this earlier on, where you feel like children are being neglected. Doreen is like, listen, we are not doing right by the children. Yes, they're complex, and you also said this earlier on, but we need to do right by them. And I think one of the researchers will say, listen, by the time you come up with like a proper regimen for a child, might take up to what, 8 years, right? So then what do we do? How do we then make rights, to all our children? Preventing, first of all, but also those ones who have been infected, making sure that they have, access to their medication, and making sure that, they are adherent. That is, when it comes to adherence, they do answer to their medication.
Okay, so I think there's the technology bit I talked to, the medicines, tests and everything. And then there's the implementation bit. And I think that's
is where the problem is.
That is where Mura has a problem.
Yes.
Which I think, I agree, I think that to a large extent, the challenges actually come into implementation, because with the technology we have today, we shouldn't be having the kind of infections we are having from mother to child. Absolutely not. Not at this time and age. Not in 2022 should we be having, 6,000 children infected per year. I mean, we have treatment, it's been proven, it's happening in other settings. We know that you can go to literally less than 1% infections, mother to child transmission. And that's the entire goal of elimination. So I think then that brings our issue is actually around implementation. So as Mora says, you need to get mothers to come to the clinic. And when they come to the clinic, they need to be able to get a test. You need to deal with the psychosocial support, disclosure issues. And you then need to make sure that they have access to the appropriate treatment and stay on treatment and follow up. So you can imagine for a lot of mothers, okay, the thing is, if you look at majority of the mothers right now who are HIV positive, most of them are mothers who already know their status and are on treatment. But a lot of the infections are actually not happening from the mothers who already know their status and are on treatment. It's the young girls who are getting a new diagnosis, It's the mothers who are not on treatment or who fall out of treatment at some point, so that brings the element of psychosocial support. I think we sort of need to go back to what used to happen in the 80s. And maybe part of the challenge that's happened over the years is the numbers have grown. I mean, as she was saying, I got into HIV work around 2003. We had very few people on treatment. Actually, there was no treatment at that time. It was coming in slowly. Yes. But in the initial years, the package of care, it was able, and part of it is related to the funding dynamics. So some things over time have dropped off the list in terms of what's supported. So for example, the community support has been scaled down. The psychosocial support, you being able to send community healthcare workers to follow up people has been scaled down because of funding dynamics, especially from the donor perspective. And I think that's what the government needs to seriously take up. Especially for certain populations, for mothers, for the youth, and such populations. So just to go back to the issue of children. So I think, as I said, at this time and age, we shouldn't be having the number of infections we're having from mother to child, because we do have the treatment, we do have the interventions. There's no reason why we should not be able to find all the positive pregnant mothers, literally. A lot of the new infections, as I said, are happening among the newly diagnosed, especially young mothers. So we still have to deal with the aspect of new infections, and then deal with the fact that a mother has been recently diagnosed and the support that needs to come around there. They require a lot of support, the shock that comes with it. Their social circumstances, a lot of times they're usually not in very good circumstances, so that requires to be supported. And then when you go to children, obviously, I think the biggest issue we have right now, if you look at the children who are suffering a lot. Also, there are many children who are in difficult social circumstances. Either they're coming from orphaned homes, or I don't know, their parents have separated, or there's always an issue, or their parents are not able to take care of them. I think the government, this social net package that we talk about as the government, that really should focus on it and income generating activities. So you can't only not just provide treatment. Of course, I completely agree that we shouldn't be experiencing the kind of stockouts that we've experienced in the last 2 years. I mean, really, it's an issue. Obviously, COVID had an issue with it, but there is also, I think, our part as a country that we played, because it's about planning, making sure that you foresee things and make sure that you have adequate supplies. But we do need to design very good, I think, packages for support for children. And that's not only ensuring treatments are there, but also making sure that you have some social package for support for the children.
All right, let's take a break. But of course, when we come back then, that aspect of donor funding, which I think is a very big issue in the country. And the question is, supposedly they pull out today, are we in a position to make sure that there is enough supply of drugs and, the testing kits, as well as the provision of all the necessary tools just to make sure that we prevent or have as many people on treatment as possible. We discuss that after this break, but keep tweeting at NTV Kenya at @Lubeme_Winyasa as the question that we're asking you. That is, what the interventions that are being implemented now, are they enough? So we'll be looking at your feedback. You do not want to miss that part of the discussion, that is as far as funding, after this short break. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. Glad you're still with us. We are on the last phase of the show, and of course it's all about the HIV burden in the country, and are we doing enough to make sure that we attain the 95-95-95, the 90-90-90. Therefore, there's a bit of a hitch, but again, we still have until 2030 to make sure that, again, we end the HIV epidemic, or at least hit the 95 target. And of course, the question that we're asking you is, are whatever interventions that have been set aside now to fight the HIV epidemic, are they enough? That is what we're asking you today. Are the interventions, to fight HIV or to end HIV and AIDS, are they enough? Keep tweeting at NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie. I can see some of you. This is Peter Oluoch, who says, best HIV prevention, abstinence. Just like that, okay? And these abstinence issues, I think Mora and Dr. Irene, I think you'll help us understand this, because for a very long time, earlier on, there was a lot of preachings about abstinence. And right now, clearly, because we're seeing the rates, of infections, especially amongst the 15 to, around 24-year-olds, really on the rise, right? So is it still something that you might consider as a tool to prevent HIV infections, Dr. Irene?
It has its place.
It has its place. So it's not all.
That's my response, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, abstinence has its place.
Yeah.
I mean, so for example, among the young,
yeah,
definitely, absolutely. And that goes with the keeping girls in schools issue, because as you've seen from the recent statistics, well, not actually recent, for the last couple of years, the new infections are mainly occurring among the young, 15 to 24, 25-year-old group. So I do think abstinence. Obviously, over time, what has happened, I think, with the emergence of new interventions, condoms, pre-exposure prophylaxis, there's less talk about abstinence.
Like Mora was saying.
There's less talk about abstinence. But I absolutely believe it has its place. Among the young people, I think it's very necessary. And of course, there are many moral dynamics about it. But I think it's one of the tools that we must continue to emphasize, make sure that we are keeping young people in school and occupied so they are not distracted. But obviously, it's not the tool for everybody.
Yeah.
It's not the tool for everybody, so it's got to be used in combination with all the other interventions that we have for HIV prevention.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then someone else says, this is Ken Boyer, who says, it is our morals that control the spread of HIV, not those condoms. Bring up your children well. Mora, what do you have to say to this?
You see, the thing is, when we had the ABC model of prevention, abstain, be faithful, use a condom, it was easy that time because the dynamics were also different. People living with HIV were not as many as we have right now.
Yeah.
And right now, there's so much technology, information, as in so much exposure going on. So with abstinence, we can do that, especially for the young, the 15 to 24, that one we can. I am currently part of an organization called the Young Network of People Living with HIV in Kenya. And they have a task force for adolescent girls and young women, because that is where most of the infections are happening, especially among adolescent girls and young women. So they are ensuring that these young women are empowered with information on HIV prevention. But number one is ensuring that they abstain. Staying in school is very important. Giving them information about HIV, about sexual reproductive health, so that these young girls are equipped with proper information. So abstinence works for them. So when you come to the other dynamic now, which is now above 24. Now those are the ones who don't believe in condomizing, they don't believe in using PrEP, they don't believe in using any HIV prevention method. In fact, most of them end up using PEP because it has already happened, they've already been exposed, so now they're like, oh, okay, this thing is real. So they go back. So I am not sure whether it is a morality issue, because when we bring in morality, then we bring in a lot of things, such even culture comes in. So I don't think it is about morality, because good or bad morals can't say that the people who are living with HIV don't have good morals. You see? So you can't really bring in the morality issue. I feel it's more about the responsibility issue. In that I am responsible for my health. My partner is responsible for their health. So together we protect each other, because with HIV, there is no one combination, there's no one method that works like all of, like it's now this is the one 100%. It needs combination prevention methods. In that if you're using PrEP, you can also use a condom as well. You can be on the dapivirine when it's finally introduced to Kenya, and also use condoms, use PrEP, you see. So it's never like a one, like let's do it on a one scale, like this is the tool and this is it, and that is how. No, it's not, it does not work like that. You need the combination prevention method so that we can ideally make sure that we reach the 100% efficacy level in that, though there is no 100% medically, right? so that you ensure that the levels of prevention are more, you increase the chances of HIV prevention. But most young people are not ready to uptake HIV prevention methods for reasons best known to them, I think. But most of them are not ready. In fact, young people are scared of becoming pregnant than getting HIV. Because they're like, HIV, I'll just take ARVs and move on with life. So they think that, I think that the mentality issue in that HIV is real. It is here. And this thing of looking at Mora and they're like, Mora does not look like they have HIV. Nobody looks like they have HIV. So, and if you don't know the status of the other person, just prevent yourself, because HIV is very, very preventable. So prevent yourself. So when it comes to the issue of morality, I cannot say much, but I can only say it's responsibility. Be responsible for your health.
I like that. And of course, Timothy, would you want to chime in on the same? Because again, when you bring in the aspect of morality, and then there's also stigma, and then there's also a case of violence. So it's like, you know, it's a circle, you know, that starts from something, you know, when someone says, no, morality is one of the things that will prevent the spread of HIV and AIDS. What do you have to say to that?
Okay, thank you. So I think I do agree to an extent with the speakers, Doreen, and the sentiments from Dr. Irene. And I will want to look like you have to address all the issues that do play a factor. So for instance, if you're talking about young people and some of the challenges or some of the reasons that, some of the challenges that they're facing. So we do have, for instance, issues to do with intergenerational sex, which is a big issue, gender-based violence, which is a big issue, lack of access, for instance, to comprehensive sexual education and information. So, for instance, debate or suggestions to introduce, for instance, issues around comprehensive sexual education in our education system have been fought against, and that one is a factor. So we have to look at all the factors that do play a role, and now work towards ensuring that interventions address all of them. So mainly I will put information being at the center of all these interventions, ensuring that access to the right information is there, access to preventative measures is there, access to treatment for all is also there. And I think with all these, again, addressing now the other human rights issues, for instance, gender-based violence, the power dynamics that lead, for instance, lead to intergenerational sex, addressing all these things, poverty will contribute to assisting in the fight.
And then also, can we just address the aspect of then access to justice and protection? And this is against stigma and discrimination. Again, where we at and what more do we need to do to make sure that then we accelerate, you know, some of the services?
Okay, thank you. So with regards to access to justice, I think this is a very important component if we're able to deal with violations that affect people living with HIV. And currently we do have HIV and AIDS tribunal that specifically addresses cases that relate to violation of rights of people living with HIV. So we can say to an extent we've had some level of awareness to the community such that people know that if I am if I'm discriminated against due to my HIV status, I can seek justice. If I lose employment, if I'm chased away from school because of HIV status, that's a violation. If I'm tested without my consent, that is a violation, and I can seek justice. So we really need to ensure that this kind of legal literacy programs exist. Everybody knows when a violation occurs and it's able to access justice through, for instance, the HIV tribunal or the court system. So again, now that becomes now a challenge to these systems to ensure that the mechanisms are easily accessible to everybody and not just people in Nairobi.
All right. And what does violations include? Because again, like you said, there's some people who might not know, that they're being violated.
So some of the violations, so when it comes to HIV, before somebody is tested for HIV, they need to provide informed consent. So you need to consent. So if you are forced to test without your consent, that is a violation. If you are tested as a precondition to you accessing employment, education, again, that's a violation of your right. HIV testing should not be a precondition for you to access any services. Again, now as stigma discrimination. So discrimination will manifest whereby, let's say in an employment setting, you have applied for a job, then the prospective employer knows your HIV status and decides not to employ you because of that fact. That is discrimination based on HIV status, and it is a violation of your right. A breach of privacy and confidentiality. Again, we have talked about issues to do with high levels of stigma and discrimination that are there in the community, such that if status is broadcasted out there without your consent and all that, that's a violation. So your HIV status is private and confidential and should only be disclosed by yourself. And I think this is a measure that has been put in place, of course, to protect the person living with HIV from undue discrimination and stigma, and also violence that might actually come out as a result of this violation. So some of these, other instances of other violations that exist, we can say, for instance, in seeking insurance and medical services. Again, if somebody discriminates you and does not offer you that service, that becomes a violation of the right. Yeah.
Okay.
So those are a few that I mentioned.
All right. So then quickly, where do you report to? Because again, even in a case of, for instance, in schools where you'd find that, and I think Mora gave this example, where everybody else knows, right? And it's not like you disclose it, someone actually linked to the information. Or there's some people who would say, I was infected and this person did not disclose their status first, okay? So then where do you report to?
Okay, so the main mechanism that has been put in place under the HIV Act is actually seeking justice through the HIV tribunal.
Okay.
Now, this is in India in relation now to filing a case there against the person who's violated. You are right when it comes to this. Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, when it comes to funding, I know this is like, are we really going to go there? But yes, we need to, because again, there was a tweet that was sent that is by the U.S. ambassador to Kenya, that Kenya has attained 90, and there was a lot of discussion around the same people saying this is one way maybe the donors are trying to somewhat pull away from the same. Again, and of course, not someone, but there's also a discussion on the rapid growth and of course the rebasing of the Kenyan economy from a low-income country to now, a middle-income country, which again might lead to the dwindling of the donor funding. So Mora, again, you are like, you sit in so many, you are in so many places, and of course, sit in so many, I would say, platforms, So listening to this and seeing all these changes, as far as donor funding, the debates that come around with it, does this scare you in terms of what next?
Yeah, it scares me.
Yeah.
Because I feel we have not yet reached that point as a country where our country can sustain the HIV response on its own.
Okay.
And with that, sometimes I feel like if the donors one day just decide to, like, say, now we are now leaving, and we are leaving you to do your HIV response on your own, we might really struggle. Because that might mean that some people will not be able to afford the medication, because if the medication is like you have to pay like maybe a small amount to get the money, there are people who cannot even afford that small amount. Sure. Because they're already, as people living with HIV, we are facing issues, especially around nutrition, whereby a person has the treatment, yes, but they don't have the food. So, and you cannot really take the treatment on an empty stomach. So we are already struggling with that as a country. And with now donors exiting slowly, because our funding keeps reducing by the years, it will mean that we will be on our own.
Okay.
And with our healthcare systems and also the expense of ARVs, I don't know whether they say it's like around 20,000 for one patient in a whole year, something of that sort. So I am not very sure if our country might be able to sustain that on its own, because we will need a little bit of support.
Okay.
So, and with that support, because at this point, if the donors leave us at this point, it is a bad point.
We're not
we are not ready at all. And with the things that keep coming up with stockouts and lack of commodities and all that, so we definitely are not ready for that.
Okay.
We really are not ready. But I am hoping that we have 8 years to 2030, and I am hoping that they push us till 2030. And then maybe by that time we will be stable.
Yeah.
By that time we'll have a standing ground where we will, because the other day I was telling my mom that there are people in some of the regiments, the second line and third line medication, who are actually purchasing medication that is out of stock currently. Yeah. And so I told her, what would you do if you had to buy your own ARVs? And she was like, I would rather die. There's no way I'm buying ARVs.
To buy, yeah.
So imagine that is one person. So how are the rest of the population who are more like her thinking? Because you will have to think, do I really need this medication, or do I just like skip a little and all? Like I can skip, leave it, leo, kesho, nini, nini. Yeah. So we can't. Even if the donor leaves, I hope that the government will have systems in place that will ensure that every person living with HIV has access to care and treatment, because that is already our right in the Constitution.
Yeah. Okay. And then Dr. Irene, so where will this place, especially the children, because like we said, by the time you get a right regimen, it takes a number of years, right? So where will this leave the children? If they decide, you know what, you guys are good on your own, let's focus on other countries that are a little bit struggling, you know?
Yeah. Okay, well, so I think the time is coming. The question is when.
Yes. With someone like seeing the signs.
Yeah, the question is when, because I think the signs are there. So, so what has happened over time is the amount of funding has been declining, slowly.
Yeah.
And then, which affects the scope of the interventions. So some of the issues Maura was talking about, keep dropping.
Yeah.
And the focus is on, let's get the drugs, let's get the test kits. But you keep cutting on other support that is probably considered non-essential. Yeah. So I think the time is coming, and I think really it's for the government to take up. There has been some improvement, I must tell you, because I know over the years, but not enough. Yes. Not enough. I mean, just for drugs alone in a year, we probably spend around 10 billion shillings without counting everything else that happens, training, community support, funding, the civil society sector. That's the other thing that people must not forget.
Yeah.
And then everything else that happens, the infrastructure. So it's coming. So I think, and this is not a new conversation. It's not a new conversation. There has to be, I think, an improvement in terms of the efforts that have been put in place. Right now, the government does actually put in money, for example, to buy drugs, to buy test kits, to buy some, substitutions for people who are using drugs. But it's not nearly enough what the government. So it's going to be such a huge leap if the donors were to decide to pull out today. It would be such a huge leap because it's not only for procurement of the commodities we see, it's for a lot of other support. All the trainings that happen, for example, all the money that's given to community workers to go look for people, all the money that's used for calling. There's a lot of the social support we are calling about. Some of the NGOs that are actually donor funded are actually the ones who provide some home support, have some income generating activities, which if the donors pull out, that will suffer dramatically.
Well. Yeah.
So we have to understand what that means and what that costs. But I think the time is coming and the signals are there and the conversation has started. And the government does need to budget and plan for it.
Yeah. Okay, and again, so Timothy, in terms of, again, because like we said earlier on, we need to make sure that some of these things are, available in the country. For instance, to procure essential commodities, that is for HIV prevention, as well as treatments. And, Kenya requires around like 25.4 billion shillings now. In the last financial year, of course, HIV, to lower cases of HIV and AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria as well, the country actually was allocated, the ministry or the department was allocated 5.8 billion shillings. That is for the 2021-2022 financial year. Is this enough?
So this is not enough. We know that donors really support a lot of components when it comes to HIV. So we are not seeing the government taking up measures or putting up in place measures to take up the task, because when PEPFAR, the tweet that we have achieved 90-90-90, that could be a signal that, hey, we are already now preparing to leave. So with this signaling that is there, with this that we have already achieved middle income status, we know that this support is going to reduce and also going away. So what are we doing in place? What are we putting in place as a government to ensure that we are allocating enough resources? We know the gaps that exist, and we are doing this. So and a second component around that is now when it comes to issues around corruption, lack of transparency, accountability. We also know that corruption, lack of accountability contributes to a lot of wastage. A lot of resources are lost through corruption and accountability. So what again are we doing to ensure, or putting in place to ensure that the little resources that we are also allocating to the health sector are not also getting lost through corruption, and we are transparent and ensuring that it actually does the work that it is intended to do.
Okay, but clearly that is not happening right now in the country. There's a problem, right? Because even that tiff between, Kenya and the USAID, and, of course, it was all about corruption, transparency, and all those things. So then moving forward and just making sure that we put everything, in order, like let's just put our house in order, just in case the donors decide you guys are okay, and we can now focus on other countries that are still struggling. So what are some of the things that the gaps that probably needs to be, to be addressed as soon as now? In your position, what would you say?
That first, we really need to ensure that we have our health sector strengthened. Like we've strengthened all aspects of our health system, cutting across the workforce, commodities. We address all issues. We have addressed aspects also to deal with access to services, and now more importantly, addressing issues to do with the resources that we allocate. So for now, we should be seeing an increase in the amount of budgeting that is actually going towards commodities, towards preventive measures, and also as these resources are actually being prioritized and increased towards the health sector, the spending and the expenditure is actually happening in a transparent and an accountable way. So I will say that some of the immediate measures is just ensuring that we allocate more to the health sector and ensure prudent spending and strengthen the systems so that they can actually discharge their functions and mandates optimally.
Okay. All right. And of course, Maura, again, we had a case of a failed vaccine, which was just sad, to realize, after years of trials, but still we do not have HIV vaccine up until now. But also, on the positive, those unapproved injectable, PrEP as well. So in terms of then, just making sure that at least by 2030, we do not see cases of what we're seeing now in this day and age. What would you say, very briefly?
We do need the vaccine in order to prevent new HIV infections.
Yeah.
But the thing is, HIV is a little bit of a complex virus, and probably the reason why there's so many trials in vaccines and cures, and still they're not coming through. But it does not stop, because the vaccines are there. I think there's a human trial vaccine going on. Yeah, there's a current human trial vaccine going on. So, which gives us hope that we are heading into the right direction. But also we are now having better HIV prevention methods coming up, which means it's a hopeful way that the numbers we have don't go overboard for us. Because if the 1.4 million keeps going up, our sustainability as a country to that number might also be an issue. So I like the fact that we keep going, like the new interventions, the new prevention methods coming up. And I love the dapivirine drink, for example, because it's women-centered. It's just for women. And it's going to, considering the number of women living with HIV is higher than men, I think it's going to really be a game changer for women. So if we keep going through this direction, by 2030 we might be at the position of ending AIDS, and also be able to be in a better position of preventing HIV.
Okay.
So
yeah, and of course, Dr. Irene, very, very briefly, because again, last year we also saw a number of women who, they actually delivered without mandatory tests, and this is again according to the HIV prevention guidelines. So very quickly, in terms of just solving all this together, just to make sure that we have the treatments, the tools and everything that is needed. What would you say?
So, as a country, we have committed to 3 zeros. That's our mission.
Yes.
So 0 new infections, 0 AIDS-related deaths, 0 discrimination. I think we should put our money and foot where our mouth is.
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, we have, I think, to get serious in terms of funding and in terms of implementing even existing tools. I tell you, even with existing tools, as Maura says, we can go a long, long way in eliminating mother-to-child transmission. We literally should be in less than 1%, even with the available tools. So I think sort out all the issues that are there, because I think in terms of the policy environment, we have literally everything, I think, in place in terms of adoption. So I think for me, the biggest issue is we need to deal with the implementation issues and make sure we achieve the vision which we have set for our country.
And again, the global scale up as well.
Absolutely.
All right, so just in short, put our house in order. That is what Dr. Irene is saying. All right, and that is where we have to put an end to the show. So Doreen Maura, founder, I Am a Beautiful Story, as well as an HIV advocate. Asante sana for coming by today. Dr. Irene Mukui, head of disease, that is HIV and drugs for neglected diseases initiative. Thank you very much, Dr. Irene, and of course not forgetting Timothy Wafula, head of HIV and TB at Kelly. We say thank you very much, and of course thank you for watching as well until the end of the show. That is where we have to say goodbye. My name is Winnie Lubembe, wishing you a lovely day ahead, but we'll see you tomorrow because the topic's all about co-parenting and is it possible? Okay, you do not want to miss that conversation tomorrow, but until then, remember to stay safe and God bless.